In the spring of 2005, 18-year-old Natalee Holloway was living what seemed like the perfect American dream. Born and raised in the affluent suburb of Mountain Brook, Alabama, she was the kind of student every parent hoped their child would become. With her bright smile, blonde hair, and infectious personality, Natalee had just accomplished one of life's major milestones, graduating from Mountain Brook High School with honors. Natalee wasn't just another pretty face in the crowd. She was academically gifted, maintaining excellent grades throughout her high school career while balancing extracurricular activities and a vibrant social life. Her dedication to her studies had paid off in the most rewarding way possible. She had earned a full scholarship to the University of Alabama, where she planned to study pre-med with dreams of becoming a doctor. Those who knew Natalee described her as ambitious, kind-hearted, and full of life. She had a natural ability to light up any room she entered, and her friends often gravitated toward her positive energy. Her teachers remembered her as diligent and curious, always asking thoughtful questions and pushing herself to excel. She wasn't the type to settle for mediocrity. Everything she did with passion and determination. Her family was incredibly proud of her achievements. Her mother, Beth Holloway, had raised Natalee to be independent and confident, instilling in her the values of hard work and perseverance. Her stepfather, George "Jug" Twitty, had been a strong father figure in her life, supporting her dreams and celebrating her successes. The family was close-knit, and Natalee's future seemed brighter than ever. As graduation approached, Natalee and her classmates began planning the traditional senior trip, a rite of passage that would mark the end of their high school years and the beginning of their adult lives. Like many American teenagers from well-to-do families, they wanted to celebrate their achievement with something special, something memorable that would bond them together one last time before they scattered to different colleges across the country. The destination they chose was Aruba, a Dutch Caribbean island known for its pristine beaches, crystal clear waters, and reputation as a safe haven for American tourists. The island marketed itself as one happy island, promoting its low crime rate and welcoming atmosphere. For parents concerned about their teenagers traveling abroad, Aruba seemed like the perfect compromise, exotic enough to be exciting, but safe enough to provide peace of mind. The trip was organized through a reputable travel company that specialized in student group travel. They would stay at the Holiday Inn Sunspree Resort, a well-known hotel that regularly hosted American student groups. The package included round-trip flights, hotel accommodations, and various activities designed to give the students a taste of Caribbean culture while keeping them entertained and supervised. Natalee was excited about the trip, but she wasn't the type to go wild or throw caution to the wind. Her friends knew her as responsible and level-headed, someone who could have fun without making reckless decisions. She had worked hard throughout high school, and this trip represented a well-deserved reward for her efforts. It was meant to be a celebration of achievement, not a week of dangerous behavior. Her parents, while naturally concerned about their daughter traveling so far from home, felt comfortable with the arrangements. The group would be chaperoned, the hotel was reputable, and Aruba had an excellent safety record with American tourists. They trusted Natalee's judgment and knew she would make smart choices. After all, she had never given them reason to worry about her decision-making in the past. In the weeks leading up to the trip, Natalee shopped for beachwear and summer clothes, excitedly discussing plans with her friends. She looked forward to relaxing on the beach, trying new foods, and creating lasting memories with her classmates before they all went their separate ways. The trip represented freedom, adventure, and the sweet taste of independence that comes with graduating from high school. As May 26, 2005 approached, their departure date, Natalee packed her bags with the same care and attention to detail she brought to everything in her life. She had no way of knowing that this trip, meant to be the perfect ending to her high school career, would instead become the beginning of one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. The young woman who boarded that plane to Aruba was full of dreams, ambitions, and an entire future stretching out before her. She was 18 years old, beautiful, intelligent, and beloved by everyone who knew her. In just a few days, she would become the center of an international media frenzy and a heartbreaking mystery that would captivate the world for nearly 2 decades. This is where our story truly begins, not with tragedy, but with promise. With a young woman who had everything to live for, embarking on what should have been the adventure of a lifetime. On May 26, 2005, Natalee Holloway and 124 of her Mountain Brook High School classmates boarded their charter flight to Aruba, filled with the excitement and anticipation that only comes with a long-awaited senior trip. The group was buzzing with energy as they settled into their seats, chattering about their plans for the week ahead. For most of these teenagers, this was their first major trip without their parents, and the sense of freedom was intoxicating. The flight to Aruba took several hours, but the time passed quickly as the students shared their expectations for the trip. Some planned to spend their days lounging on the famous Eagle Beach, while others were eager to try water sports like snorkeling and parasailing. Natalee, true to her curious nature, had researched some of the island's cultural attractions and was interested in exploring beyond just the beach resort experience. Upon landing at Queen Beatrix International Airport, the group was greeted by the warm Caribbean air and the sight of palm trees swaying in the tropical breeze. The contrast between Alabama's spring weather and Aruba's year-round summer was immediately apparent, and the students couldn't wait to trade their traveling clothes for swimwear. The excitement was palpable as they collected their luggage and boarded the buses that would take them to their home for the next 5 days. The Holiday Inn Sunspree Resort was everything they had hoped for and more. Located on Palm Beach, one of Aruba's most beautiful stretches of coastline, the hotel offered direct access to pristine white sand beaches and turquoise waters. The resort was specifically designed to cater to groups like theirs, with multiple pools, beach volleyball courts, and various entertainment options. The students were assigned rooms in pairs, and Natalee was rooming with her close friend Ruth McVeigh. The first few days of the trip unfolded exactly as everyone had imagined. The Mountain Brook students quickly settled into a routine of beach days, poolside relaxation, and evening entertainment. They explored the hotel's amenities, tried local foods at the resort restaurants, and mingled with other American student groups who were also staying at the Holiday Inn. The atmosphere was festive and carefree, with the kind of easy camaraderie that develops when teenagers are freed from the pressures of school and family obligations. Natalee embraced every aspect of the experience. She spent her mornings on the beach, often reading a book under an umbrella or playing volleyball with her classmates. Her friends remember her being in great spirits, laughing frequently, and seeming completely relaxed for perhaps the first time in months. The stress of senior year, college applications, and the pressure to maintain her perfect academic record had finally lifted, and she was thoroughly enjoying her well-deserved break. The group's chaperones maintained a reasonable level of supervision without being overly restrictive. They understood that these were graduating seniors, young adults who were about to head off to college, and they deserved some freedom to enjoy themselves. The chaperones were available if needed, but they allowed the students to explore the resort and participate in organized activities with minimal interference. During the day, the students often ventured beyond the resort to explore other parts of the island. They visited local shops in downtown Oranjestad, Aruba's capital, where they browsed for souvenirs and sampled local cuisine. Some took organized excursions to see Aruba's famous natural rock formations, while others preferred to stay closer to the hotel, enjoying the beach and pool facilities. The evenings brought a different kind of excitement. The Holiday Inn hosted various entertainment options, from live music to theme parties designed specifically for their American guests. The students would gather in the hotel's common areas, sharing stories from their day and making plans for the following day's activities. There was a sense of unity among the group. They were all sharing this special experience together, creating memories that would last long after they graduated. Natalee was particularly enjoying the social aspects of the trip. Always popular among her classmates, she found herself at the center of many group activities. Her friends later recalled how happy and carefree she seemed during those first few days. She was taking pictures constantly, wanting to document every moment of the experience. She called her mother several times to share her excitement and described the beautiful scenery. The resort staff was welcoming and accommodating, going out of their way to ensure the American students had a positive experience. Many of the employees spoke excellent English and were happy to share recommendations for local attractions and restaurants. The students felt safe and welcome on the island, which had built its tourism industry largely on its reputation as a secure destination for American visitors. By the fourth day of their trip, the group had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They had explored much of what the resort had to offer, made friends with students from other schools who were also visiting, and had begun to feel like temporary locals. The initial excitement of being in a new place had evolved into a deeper appreciation for the island's beauty and culture. As May 29th turned into May 30th, none of the students could have predicted that their perfect vacation was about to take a dark turn. The carefree atmosphere that had defined their trip was about to be shattered in ways that none of them could have imagined. The stage was being set for a night that would change everything, not just for their group, but for families, investigators, and observers around the world. The paradise they had found in Aruba was about to become the setting for every parent's worst nightmare. May 30th, 2005, started like any other day of a trip. Natalee woke up in her hotel room, feeling refreshed and excited about their second-to-last day in paradise. She and her roommate Ruth had planned to make the most of their remaining time, knowing that tomorrow they would be packing up and preparing for their early morning flight back to Alabama. The sun was shining brightly over Palm Beach, and the turquoise waters beckoned as invitingly as they had every day of their stay. During the day, Natalee followed her usual routine of beach time and relaxation. She spent hours soaking up the Caribbean sun, chatting with friends, and taking what would unknowingly become some of her final photographs. Her classmates remember her being in particularly good spirits that day, perhaps because she was savoring these last precious hours of their senior trip. She talked about how much she would miss the island and how she couldn't wait to tell her family about all her adventures. As the afternoon wore on, the group began discussing their plans for their final night in Aruba. Many of the students wanted to make it memorable, to go out with a bang before returning to reality. Word spread through the group about Carlos and Charlie's, a popular beachfront restaurant and bar that was known for attracting tourists, especially American college students and young adults. The establishment had a reputation for being fun and lively, with music, dancing, and a party atmosphere that seemed perfect for their last night celebration. Carlos and Charlie's was located just a short distance from their hotel, making it an easy choice for the group. The restaurant was part of a chain that specifically catered to tourists, offering familiar American-style food along with tropical drinks and entertainment. It marketed itself as a safe, fun environment where visitors could let loose and enjoy themselves without worry. For a group of American teenagers looking to celebrate, it seemed like the obvious choice. That evening, a large portion of the Mountain Brook group made their way to Carlos and Charlie's. The atmosphere was exactly what they had hoped for: energetic, festive, and filled with other young tourists from various countries. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. Natalee was among the group, looking forward to celebrating their successful trip with her classmates one last time. It was at Carlos and Charlie's that Natalee's path would fatally intersect with three local young men who would forever change the course of her life. Joran van der Sloot was 17 years old, a tall, blonde Dutch teenager whose father was a prominent lawyer on the island. Despite his young age, Joran was known around the tourist areas and had a reputation for approaching American girls visiting the island. He spoke fluent English and knew how to present himself as charming and trustworthy. With Joran were two brothers, Deepak and Satish Kalpo, who were 21 and 18 years old respectively. Of Surinamese descent, the brothers worked various jobs on the island and often spent their evenings at tourist hotspots, particularly those frequented by American visitors. Deepak worked as a security guard, while Satish was a student. Both brothers knew Joran through the small social circles that existed among young people on the island. The three young men had apparently made it something of a routine to visit places like Carlos and Charlie's, where they could meet American tourist girls who were on vacation and looking to have fun. They understood that these girls were often away from home for the first time, feeling free and adventurous in a tropical paradise setting. For predators, such environments provided perfect hunting grounds. According to later testimony and witness accounts, Joran approached Natalee sometime during the evening at Carlos and Charlie's. He was smooth and confident, striking up a conversation with her about the island and her vacation experience. To Natalee and her friends, he seemed like a friendly local who could show them a good time on their last night. His youth and appearance made him seem harmless, and his perfect English put them at ease. As the night progressed at Carlos and Charlie's, Natalee found herself spending more time talking with Joran and his two companions. Her classmates later recalled seeing her laughing and appearing to enjoy their conversation. To outside observers, it looked like a typical vacation interaction, American tourists meeting friendly locals who were eager to show them around and help them have a memorable experience. When Carlos and Charlie's began winding down for the evening, Joran made his move. He suggested that he and the Calpo brothers could show Natalee some of the island's nightlife that tourists didn't usually get to experience. They painted a picture of exclusive local spots, authentic island culture, and adventures that would make her last night in Aruba truly unforgettable. It was exactly the kind of spontaneous, exciting offer that might appeal to an 18-year-old who was feeling confident and free. Natalee's friends later said they tried to dissuade her from leaving with the three men. Some of them had concerns about her going off with locals they had just met, especially since they would all need to be up early the next morning for their flight home. But Natalee seemed convinced that this was a safe opportunity to experience something authentic and exciting on her last night in paradise. The decision she made in that moment, to leave Carlos and Charlie's with Joran van der Sloot and the Calpo brothers, would prove to be the last decision Natalee and Holloway would ever make. As she walked out of the restaurant and into the warm Caribbean night, she had no way of knowing that she was walking toward a fate that would make her one of the most famous missing persons in American history. Her classmates watched her leave, assuming they would see her back at the hotel later that night or in the morning before their departure. None of them could have imagined that this would be the last time any of them would ever see their friend alive. The morning of May 31st, 2005, should have been filled with the usual chaos of departure day. Students packing their final belongings, exchanging contact information, and preparing for their journey home to Alabama. Instead, it became the beginning of every parent's worst nightmare and one of the most perplexing missing person cases in modern history. The Holiday Inn Sunspree Resort, which had been filled with laughter and celebration for the past 5 days, was about to become ground zero for a mystery that would captivate the world. Ruth McVeigh, Natalee's roommate, was the first to realize something was seriously wrong. She had returned to their room the night before and found Natalee's bed empty, but this hadn't immediately alarmed her. It wasn't uncommon for students to stay out late on vacation, and she assumed Natalee might have crashed in another friend's room or simply stayed out later than usual. However, when Ruth woke up on departure morning and saw that Natalee's bed was still untouched, a knot began forming in her stomach. The students were scheduled to meet in the hotel lobby at 10 a.m. for their bus transfer to the airport. Their flight back to Birmingham, Alabama, was departing at 1 p.m., and everyone needed to be accounted for well before then. As the departure time approached, Ruth frantically searched for her roommate, asking other students if they had seen Natalee return to the hotel the night before. The answers she received only deepened her growing concern. No one had seen Natalee since she left Carlos and Charlie's with the 3 local men. The chaperones, who had maintained a relatively relaxed supervisory approach throughout the trip, suddenly found themselves facing a parent's worst fear. When they realized that Natalee was genuinely missing and not simply running late, they immediately began implementing emergency protocols. They contacted the front desk to confirm that Natalee hadn't returned to her room, checked with hotel security to see if she had been seen anywhere on the property, and began calling her cell phone repeatedly. But it went straight to voicemail every time. As 10 a.m. came and went with no sign of Natalee, the reality of the situation began to sink in for everyone involved. This was no longer about a student who was running late or had lost track of time. This was about a missing 18-year-old girl in a foreign country, and every minute that passed made the situation more serious. The other students, who had been excitedly discussing their trip home just hours earlier, now found themselves caught in a surreal nightmare. The decision was made to delay the departure as long as possible while conducting an immediate search of the hotel and surrounding areas. Students spread out across the resort, checking every possible location where Natalee might be found. They searched the beach, the pools, the restaurants, and every common area of the hotel. They knocked on doors, asked other guests if they had seen her, and even checked areas where she might have gone to be alone or make a phone call. Hotel management became involved immediately, providing access to security footage and guest records. They assured the chaperones that they would do everything in their power to help locate Natalee, but their initial review of security cameras showed no sign of her returning to the hotel after leaving the night before. This confirmed what her friends had suspected. She had never made it back to the Holiday Inn after going out with Joran van der Sloot and the Calpo brothers. As the hours ticked by, the airline and travel company became involved in the crisis. The departure time was pushed back as far as possible, but eventually, a heartbreaking decision had to be made. The other 124 students couldn't be kept in Aruba indefinitely, and arrangements needed to be made for Natalee's parents to come to the island immediately. The flight would have to leave without her, carrying her devastated classmates back to Alabama while she remained missing in a foreign country. The moment when the bus pulled away from the Holiday Inn without Natalee was one that none of her classmates would ever forget. Many of them were crying, shocked by how quickly their perfect vacation had turned into a nightmare. They carried with them not only their own luggage and souvenirs, but also Natalee's belongings, a painful reminder of the friend they were leaving behind. Her packed suitcase, filled with beachwear and vacation mementos, would become evidence in a criminal investigation. Back in Alabama, Beth Holloway was going about her normal Tuesday morning routine when she received the phone call that would change her life forever. The news that her daughter was missing in Aruba hit her like a physical blow. Within hours, she was making frantic arrangements to travel to the island, her mind reeling with questions and fears that no parent should ever have to face. Her daughter, who had never given her a moment's worry, was now missing in a foreign country with no explanation. The Aruban authorities were contacted immediately after it became clear that Natalee was genuinely missing. The local police, who were more accustomed to dealing with minor tourist issues like lost passports or petty theft, suddenly found themselves facing a high-profile missing person case involving an American teenager. The Royal Netherlands Marechaussee, which provided police services for Aruba, began their initial investigation within hours of being notified. The first official searches began that afternoon, focusing on the areas around Carlos and Charlie's and the route between the restaurant and the Holiday Inn. Police officers canvassed the area, speaking with employees at the restaurant and other establishments to piece together Natalee's final known movements. They also began the process of identifying and locating the three men she had been seen with, a task that would prove easier said than done in the close-knit island community. As word of Natalee's disappearance began to spread beyond the immediate circle of those involved, it quickly became clear that this was not going to be a quiet, local matter. The combination of factors, a beautiful, young American girl missing in a foreign country during a graduation trip, was exactly the kind of story that would capture media attention and public interest. The case was about to explode into an international sensation. The sun set on May 31st, 2005, marking the end of what should have been Natalee's last day in paradise and her first official day as a missing person. As darkness fell over the island, search teams continued their efforts with flashlights and spotlights, hoping against hope that they would find her safe and with a reasonable explanation for her absence. But deep down, everyone involved was beginning to fear the worst. The beautiful island of Aruba, with its pristine beaches and promise of safety for American tourists, had become a backdrop for a mystery that would haunt investigators, journalists, and the public for years to come. And somewhere in the darkness, the truth about what had happened to Natalee and Holloway remained hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Within hours of Natalee's disappearance becoming official, the case transformed from a local missing person investigation into an international incident that would strain diplomatic relations between the United States and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Beth Holloway, accompanied by family friends and a growing entourage of supporters, arrived in Aruba on June 1st, just over 24 hours after her daughter had vanished. Her arrival marked the beginning of what would become one of the most intense and scrutinized criminal investigations in Caribbean history. Beth Holloway's first encounter with the Aruban justice system was a jarring introduction to a legal framework vastly different from what Americans were accustomed to. The Dutch legal system, which governed Aruba as an autonomous territory, operated under different principles than the American system. There was no presumption of innocence in the same way Americans understood it, no Miranda rights, and interrogation procedures that seemed foreign and inadequate to a desperate mother seeking answers about her missing daughter. The Aruban police had already begun questioning potential witnesses and reviewing security footage from various establishments around the island. Their investigation quickly focused on the last people known to have seen Natalee alive, Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers, Deepak and Satish. However, the initial questioning revealed immediately contradictory stories that would become the hallmark of this case for years to come. Joran van der Sloot's first version of events was that he, along with Deepak and Satish Kalpoe, had taken Natalee to the California Lighthouse area on the northern tip of the island. According to his initial statement, they had gone there to look at sharks in the water, and afterward, they had dropped Natalee off at the Holiday Inn around 2 a.m. He claimed that he had seen her walk toward the hotel lobby and assumed she had made it safely inside. This story would be the first of many versions Joran would tell over the coming years. The Kalpoe brothers corroborated Joran's initial account, stating that they had indeed driven Natalee and Joran to the lighthouse area and then returned her to the hotel. Deepak, who had been driving his family's Honda Civic that night, insisted that they had simply given Natalee a tour of the island and then safely returned her to her hotel. Both brothers maintained that they had last seen her walking toward the Holiday Inn entrance in the early morning hours of May 31st. However, hotel security footage immediately contradicted these claims. The Holiday Inn surveillance cameras showed no evidence of Natalee returning to the hotel at any point after leaving for Carlos and Charlie's. The security tapes were reviewed multiple times by both Aruban investigators and FBI agents who had been called in to assist with the case. Every angle, every timestamp was scrutinized, but Natalee simply never appeared on any of the recordings from that night. As news of the case spread internationally, it attracted an unprecedented level of media attention. American news networks began sending their top correspondents to Aruba, setting up satellite feeds and broadcasting live from the island daily. The story had all the elements that capture public imagination: a beautiful young woman, a mysterious disappearance in paradise, and foreign suspects whose stories didn't add up. Within days, Natalee's face was on television screens across America and around the world. The intense media scrutiny put enormous pressure on Aruban authorities, who were not accustomed to handling cases under such international spotlight. The island's economy depended heavily on tourism, particularly American tourism, and the negative publicity surrounding Natalee's disappearance threatened to damage Aruba's reputation as a safe destination. This created a complex dynamic where investigators were trying to solve a serious crime while also managing a public relations crisis. FBI agents arrived on the island to assist with the investigation, but their role was limited by jurisdictional constraints. Aruba was a sovereign territory with its own legal system, and American law enforcement could only participate in an advisory capacity. This frustrated Beth Holloway and other family members, who felt that American investigators would be more aggressive and effective in pursuing leads and questioning suspects. The search efforts expanded dramatically as volunteers, professional search teams, and law enforcement agencies from multiple countries joined the effort. Helicopters scoured the coastline and interior of the island, while divers searched underwater areas where a body might have been disposed of. Ground teams with search dogs combed through dense vegetation, abandoned buildings, and remote areas of the island. The searches were methodical and extensive, but they yielded no trace of Natalee or her belongings. As the investigation continued, the stories told by Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers began to change and evolve. Joran, in particular, seemed to have a different version of events each time he was questioned. Sometimes he claimed they had gone to the beach, other times to various bars or clubs. His accounts of what time they had dropped Natalee off varied, as did his descriptions of her condition and behavior throughout the evening. The changing narratives and contradictory statements frustrated investigators and convinced many observers that the three young men were hiding something significant. The inconsistencies were not minor details that might be forgotten or confused over time. They were fundamental aspects of the evening that any truthful witness should have been able to recall consistently. International pressure began mounting on the Aruban government to take more aggressive action in the case. American politicians, including several senators and congressmen, called for boycotts of Aruba until the case was resolved. The Dutch government found itself in the uncomfortable position of trying to balance support for its Caribbean territory while also maintaining good relations with the United States. Beth Holloway became a formidable presence on the island, refusing to leave until she had answers about her daughter's fate. She held press conferences, organized search efforts, and maintained constant pressure on investigators to pursue every possible lead. Her determination and media savvy helped keep the case in the international spotlight, but it also created tension with local authorities who felt their efforts were being unfairly criticized. As June progressed into July, it became increasingly clear that this would not be a case that would be solved quickly or easily. The three main suspects continued to maintain their innocence while telling inconsistent stories. No physical evidence had been found despite extensive searches, and leads that initially seemed promising led nowhere. The beautiful island paradise had become the setting for an investigation that seemed to grow more complex and frustrating with each passing day. The case was evolving from a missing person investigation into something much darker and more complicated. A potential murder case with suspects who seemed to be playing games with investigators and a victim who had seemingly vanished without a trace in one of the safest tourist destinations in the Caribbean. As 2005 turned into 2006, the Natalee Holloway case had become a permanent fixture in the American media landscape, but the investigation itself seemed to be trapped in a frustrating cycle of false leads, changing stories, and dead ends. Joran van der Sloot had been arrested and released multiple times, each arrest accompanied by hope that finally answers would emerge. But each release brought only more questions and deeper frustration for everyone seeking the truth about what happened to the Alabama teenager. The pattern that would define the case for years to come was already well established. Joran would tell one version of events during questioning, then later recant or modify his story when confronted with contradictory evidence. His ability to remain calm under pressure and his skill at manipulating his narrative made him both a compelling suspect and an incredibly frustrating one for investigators who couldn't seem to pin him down to a consistent account of that night. In early 2006, a significant development occurred when Joran confessed to a fellow inmate while in custody. According to the inmate, Joran had admitted that Natalee had died and that he had disposed of her body in the ocean. The confession included specific details about how he had called a friend with a boat to help dispose of the evidence. However, when confronted with this alleged confession, Joran vehemently denied making any such statements, claiming the inmate was lying to gain favor with authorities. The Kalpoe brothers, meanwhile, maintained their innocence throughout multiple rounds of questioning and arrests. Their stories remained relatively consistent compared to Joran's ever-changing accounts, but investigators noticed subtle shifts in their narratives over time. Deepak, the older brother who had been driving that night, seemed particularly nervous during questioning and occasionally provided details that didn't align with his previous statements. As months stretched into years, the investigation expanded beyond the immediate suspects to include other individuals who might have had knowledge of what happened. Several people came forward claiming to have information about the case, but most of these leads proved to be either unreliable or deliberately false. The high-profile nature of the case attracted attention seekers and individuals with their own agendas. making it difficult for investigators to separate genuine leads from publicity stunts. The media attention, while keeping the case in the public eye, also created problems for the investigation. Potential witnesses became reluctant to come forward, fearing they would be thrust into the international spotlight. Some locals on the island grew tired of the constant media presence and began to resent the implication that Aruba was somehow responsible for what had happened to Natalee. The tourism industry, crucial to the island's economy, suffered as potential visitors chose other destinations. Beth Holloway became an increasingly prominent figure in the case, using her media platform to maintain pressure on investigators and keep her daughter's story alive. She wrote a book about her experience, appeared on countless television programs, and worked tirelessly to reform laws regarding Americans missing abroad. Her determination was admirable, but it also created tension with Aruban authorities who felt their efforts were being unfairly criticized and their sovereignty undermined. In 2007, the case took a dramatic turn when new witnesses emerged claiming to have seen Natalee on the night she disappeared. A witness came forward stating that he had seen Joran van der Sloot and Natalee on a beach, and that Natalee appeared to be in distress. However, this witness's credibility was quickly questioned when inconsistencies emerged in his story, and his motives for coming forward so late in the investigation were unclear. The Dutch authorities, facing mounting pressure from both the United States and the Netherlands, brought in additional investigators and resources to help solve the case. Special Prosecutor Hans Moos was appointed to lead a renewed investigation in 2007, bringing fresh eyes and new techniques to evidence that had been examined countless times before. However, even with additional resources and expertise, the case remained stubbornly unsolved. Technology began playing an increasingly important role in the investigation as new forensic techniques became available. Investigators re-examined physical evidence using more advanced methods, hoping to find traces of DNA or other clues that might have been missed in the initial investigation. Underwater search teams used sophisticated sonar equipment to scan areas of the ocean floor that hadn't been thoroughly explored before. Despite these technological advances, no breakthrough evidence was discovered. The case took a shocking turn in May 2010, exactly 5 years after Natalee's disappearance, when Joran van der Sloot was arrested in Peru for the murder of 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez. The young Peruvian woman had been found dead in Joran's hotel room in Lima, and surveillance footage clearly showed him entering and leaving the room around the time of the murder. The arrest brought renewed attention to the Natalee Holloway case and raised questions about whether Joran was a serial killer. Stephanie Flores had been killed on May 30th, 2010, exactly 5 years to the day after Natalee's disappearance. The coincidence was too significant to ignore, and it provided new insights into Joran's psychological profile. Investigators noted similarities between the two cases. Both involved young women who had met Joran in a social setting. Both had last been seen alive in his company, and both had died under mysterious circumstances. The Peruvian murder case moved much more quickly than the Aruban investigation. Within months, Joran had confessed to killing Stephanie Flores and was sentenced to 28 years in prison. His confession in the Peruvian case was detailed and consistent, in stark contrast to his ever-changing accounts of what happened to Natalee. The successful prosecution in Peru raised questions about why the Aruban case had never been resolved. Beth Holloway traveled to Peru to witness Joran's trial, hoping that his conviction for murder would somehow provide answers about her daughter's fate. While the Peruvian conviction confirmed what many had long suspected, that Joran van der Sloot was capable of murder, it still didn't provide the specific answers about what happened to Natalee that her family desperately sought. As 2010 turned into 2011, and then 2012, the Natalee Holloway case remained officially unsolved despite the fact that the prime suspect was now serving time for another murder. Joran's imprisonment in Peru meant that he was no longer available for questioning by Aruban authorities, creating another obstacle in an already difficult investigation. The case had become a symbol of the challenges faced by families of missing persons, particularly when those disappearances occur in foreign countries with different legal systems. The years of mystery had taken their toll on everyone involved. Natalee's family continued to seek answers while trying to move forward with their lives. The investigation had consumed enormous resources and international attention, but the fundamental questions remained unanswered. What exactly had happened to Natalee Holloway on May 30th, 2005? Where's her body? And would her family ever have the closure they desperately sought after years of uncertainty and pain? For nearly 18 years, the name Natalee Holloway had become synonymous with unsolved mysteries and international intrigue. Her disappearance had spawned countless documentaries, books, and television specials, but the fundamental questions about her fate remained unanswered. Then, in 2023, a series of extraordinary legal developments would finally bring the truth to light and provide the closure that her family had sought for nearly 2 decades. The breakthrough began with a federal investigation into Joran van der Slot's attempts to extort money from Beth Holloway in the years following her daughter's disappearance. In 2010, just months before he murdered Stephanie Flores in Peru, Joran had contacted Beth Holloway and offered to reveal the location of Natalee's body in exchange for $250,000. He had accepted $25,000 as a down payment, but then provided false information about the burial site. This extortion scheme had been a federal crime, and U.S. authorities had been building a case against him for years. The extortion charges provided the legal mechanism that American prosecutors needed to bring Joran van der Slot back to U.S. soil. After years of complex international negotiations involving the governments of the United States, Peru, and the Netherlands, an agreement was reached for Joran's temporary extradition from Peru to face charges in Alabama federal court. The extradition was contingent upon him serving his sentence in Peru for the murder of Stephanie Flores, but it opened the door for American justice to finally be served. On June 8, 2023, Joran van der Slot was transferred from his prison in Peru to Birmingham, Alabama, to face federal charges of extortion and wire fraud related to his attempts to exploit Beth Holloway's grief for financial gain. The sight of him in shackles, being led into the same federal courthouse where Beth Holloway had waited years for justice, was both surreal and deeply emotional for everyone who had followed the case. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once Joran arrived in Alabama. Federal prosecutors had built a strong case around the extortion charges, with evidence including recorded phone calls, financial transactions, and testimony from witnesses. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of additional time in an American federal prison, Joran's legal team began negotiations for a plea agreement that would resolve not only the federal charges, but also provide answers about Natalee's disappearance. The plea negotiations were extraordinarily sensitive, involving not just legal considerations, but also the emotional needs of the Holloway family. Beth Holloway and her legal team had to weigh their desire for punishment against their desperate need for truth. After 18 years of lies, contradictory stories, and false leads, they finally had leverage to demand the complete truth about what happened to Natalee on that fateful night in May 2005. On October 18, 2023, in a packed federal courtroom in Birmingham, Joran van der Slot finally confessed to the murder of Natalee and Holloway. As part of his plea agreement to the federal extortion charges, he was required to provide a complete and truthful account of the events of May 30th, 2005. The confession he delivered was shocking in its brutality and callousness, but it finally answered the questions that had haunted investigators and the public for nearly 2 decades. According to Joran's confession, after leaving Carlos and Charlie's with Natalee, the group had indeed gone to a beach on the northern part of the island. Once there, Joran made sexual advances toward Natalee, which she rejected. When she continued to refuse his advances and attempted to leave, Joran became violent. He admitted to hitting her with such force that she fell unconscious and likely died from her injuries within moments of the attack. The confession revealed the cold calculation that followed the murder. Joran admitted that he had called his father, Paulus van der Slot, who was a prominent attorney on the island. Rather than calling for medical help or contacting authorities, father and son made the decision to dispose of Natalee's body to protect Joran from prosecution. Paulus van der Slot, who had died in 2021, had been complicit in covering up the crime from the very beginning. Joran's detailed account explained how they had transported Natalee's body to a remote location and disposed of it in such a way that it would never be found. The specific details of the disposal were horrific and demonstrated the premeditated nature of the cover-up. He had then returned to create an alibi with the Calpo brothers, involving them in a web of lies that would persist for years without them knowing the full truth of what had happened. The confession also revealed why the investigation had been so frustrating and unsuccessful for so many years. Joran admitted that he had deliberately misled investigators with false information, changing his story repeatedly to keep them chasing leads that would never produce results. His father's legal expertise had helped him understand how to manipulate the investigation while staying just within the bounds of what he could legally get away with. Beth Holloway was present in the courtroom when Joran delivered his confession. After 18 years of uncertainty, lies, and false hope, she finally heard the truth about her daughter's final moments. The confession was devastating in its details, but it also provided something that had been missing for nearly 2 decades: certainty about what had happened and confirmation that her instincts about Joran's guilt had been correct all along. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Joran van der Sloot received a 20-year federal sentence for the extortion charges to be served concurrently with his sentence in Peru. This meant that he would return to Peru to complete his sentence for the murder of Stephanie Flores, but he would face additional time in prison for his crimes against the Holloway family. More importantly for the family, the plea agreement included provisions that he could never profit from his crimes or sell his story. The resolution of the case brought mixed emotions for everyone who had followed it. There was relief that the truth had finally emerged and that Joran could no longer manipulate the legal system or exploit the family's pain. However, there was also profound sadness that it had taken 18 years to reach this point and that Natalee's body had never been recovered, denying the family the closure that comes with a proper burial. The Natalee Holloway case became a catalyst for changes in how missing persons cases involving Americans abroad are handled. The investigation highlighted the challenges of pursuing justice across international borders and the need for better coordination between law enforcement agencies in different countries. Beth Holloway's advocacy work led to legislative changes designed to provide better support for families facing similar tragedies. As 2023 drew to a close, the mystery that had captivated the world for nearly 2 decades was finally solved. Natalee Holloway, the bright, promising young woman who had vanished during what should have been the celebration of her high school graduation, was confirmed to be the victim of a senseless act of violence committed by someone who had preyed upon her trust and vulnerability. While justice had been delayed for far too long, it had finally been served, and her family could begin the long process of healing from a wound that had remained open for 18 years.